Hey, what's up, guys? Hello, so Football Talk here. As we have reached the fourth and final week of a divisional draft breakdown series, having finished up the North, East, and South already. So this week we're going to talk about the NFC and AFC West, with today's team on the schedule being the Cardinals, Rams, 49ers, and Seahawks. For the people who have followed this series, they already know what's up, but just quickly here, we're going to go team by team in alphabetical order, quickly run through all the picks these teams made, discuss my individual evaluations of those players and how they fit with their new teams, and then talk a little bit more about the class as a whole, before at the end of the video, we're going to rank the classes of these four teams against each other. Timestamps for each team are linked down below in the description, but even if you're just a fan of one of these teams here, I'd encourage you to stick around to kind of know what your divisional rivals have done this offseason. And without any further ado, let's just get into our first team here, the Arizona Cardinals, who went first round 16th overall, Zaven Collins, the linebacker out of Tulsa. Second round, 49th overall, Rondale Moore, the wide receiver out of Purdue. Fourth round, 136th overall, Marco Wilson, the cornerback out of Florida. Then two sixth round picks, 210th overall, Victor Dimukeje, the edge rusher out of Duke. And 223rd overall, Tay Gowan, the cornerback out of UCF. And then two more seventh round picks, 243rd overall, James Wiggins, the safety out of Cincinnati, and 247th overall, Michael Mennett, the interior offensive lineman out of Penn State. So the Cardinals in the first round certainly delivered one of the more surprising picks, I would say, even though if you closely followed the whole draft media, you heard some noise about the Zaven Collins kid going to Arizona potentially, if neither one of those receivers were available to them. And I really thought Jalen Waddle was that guy who went 10 picks earlier, so he wasn't really in range for them. But here at 16th overall, Collins, to some people, maybe a little bit early, but I certainly really enjoyed his tape. The build for a stand-up inside linebacker, at least that's what he paid at Tulsa, is pretty crazy. At like 6'3.5", 260 pounds, actually weighed in at 270 during the scouting combine, as they want to call it, which actually just is more of a medical checkup. But he certainly put some impressive stuff on tape. Was the Bronco Nagurski winner this past season for the best linebacker in the country, despite playing for a small school like Tulsa, where not a lot of people are paying attention necessarily, but made so many impact plays. I think 4 interceptions, 2 of them he took back to the house. Another one basically sealed the game, like a lot of big plays. Also can remember a safety where he's shooting a gap and taking a ball carrier down in the end zone. Very instinctive playmaker on that second level, who I thought from 2019 to this year got more of that quickness, that reactionary stuff where you can just see a hole open up and shoot through it. Great range. And at Tulsa, it was kind of odd, the system they were running, where basically for him the job was control those A-gaps, and if the ball gets to the edges, you will chase after it. So that's going to be a bit of an adjustment maybe going to the league, where it's more of your typical run fits, where you're responsible for 1 or 2 gaps and have to read the man in front of you, depending on the front that you're playing, where the Cardinals are pretty multiple in the things that they do up front, under Vance Joseph. But with him, even more so, what intrigues you is the things that he can do in the pass game, the range that he has for such a big guy, and the height as well, where you can't really throw over him in those hook area zone drops. And it was pretty simplistic with the things that they did with him. Like I said, pretty much pure spot drops, rather than actually having to match up with guys. But also the things that he brings as a blitzer, whether it's through one of those interior gaps, his timing and ability to defeat blocks, but also on the edge was used quite a bit, and some people looked at him at that size, potentially playing on the edge full time. I've heard some reports about how Collins could be the starting Sam backer and replace what he had in Hassan Reddick. I don't see why you would invest such a high draft pick on a player like that, even though it obviously is a very valuable position. But Collins, to me, is more of a natural stand-up backer who can give you that ability to be multiple on third downs and really deploy him in all different areas. But to me, him next to Isaiah Simmons, a duo of athletic freaks on that second level, like all the things that they can do. I really like the way that this defense is starting to shape up. And you look at them last season under that DC Joseph, very much a hybrid defense that can throw a lot of different things at you on third downs, different pressure looks and coverages behind it. So I'm very interested to see exactly how they will use Collins and how this defense looks as a whole with some of the additions they have made. And then in the second round, they come back and boost the offense with Rondale Moore, the Purdue wide receiver, one of the most explosive weapons in this entire draft. With him, the whole story, why he was even available here in the second round, which is pretty high, but he looked like an absolute superstar his freshman year at Purdue. For us big-time college fans, obviously we can all remember when he just tore up the Ohio State defense that was filled with high draft picks, and he was making people miss, breaking tackles, and just rip him off big play after big play. And that really was his freshman year, the things he did as a return man and as a quick touch guy in offense. But then these last 2 years has just been fighting for injuries. This past season, where he was limited as well and came in late, we really saw him as this guy who just caught the ball at 5-yard range, nothing beyond that almost. And he just didn't get a chance to show us his vertical prowess as well, which he's really good at tracking the ball at kind of weird angles, and just the speed that he has to just run by safeties. But like I said, the majority of the tape that you saw was him just catching the ball underneath and making plays for this team with that secondary burst that he has once the ball is in his hands. And that's what he really has to work on, that ability to create separation as a route runner. You see some of those abilities already, where he can win with different footwork and cross the face of a safety or cornerback. Certainly needs some refinement in that area still, but that explosiveness that he has, if he just works on being a little more consistent in that area, and once the ball is in his hands, he's just so dynamic, that speed to run away from people, the vision for making people miss in the open field, and just that crazy contact balance that he has for such a small guy at like 5'9". You saw it in some of the testing numbers with the vertical and broad jump that he had at his pro day, and just on tape where you have a couple of guys wrapped around his legs and he finds a way to escape. Like, he's highly impressive in that area and will be a playmaker for this offense right away, next to DeAndre Hopkins, who is really the one dependable force that they have on the outside. Moore now operating out of the slot. And then you have guys like Christian Kirk, who's kind of still trying to establish himself as a reliable player. A.J. Green, who's coming off a year where he looked really old now. So I think Moore actually gives them some much needed juice here for an offense that's going to spread the defense out and try to make plays all over the field. And then we move on to day 3 here with Marco Wilson, the cornerback out of Florida. Actually the brother of former Colts second round pick Quincy Wilson, who I liked quite a bit. And Marco is also a very talented corner who was primarily used playing on the right side of Florida's defense, but he did move into the slot for about 350 snaps these last 2 years. Very smooth in his transitions and looks comfortable carrying receivers down the post to go with getting his hands in there between the midst of the targets consistently. I don't think he has the greatest short area burst, and too many times he's there at the catch point but can't quite deny the receiver, and his tackling could use some work. But the real issue here is on the mental side for me, like committing a pass interference penalty on a 4th and 23, on a pass that traveled not even half the distance against Miami in 2019. And then of course that moment that we all remember, him throwing the shoe of an LSU receiver last season, which allowed the Tigers to keep that drive going and hit the game-winning field goal, which denied them a chance of, if they beat Alabama, probably to make the college football playoff. So this crap better not follow him into the league. And he has some stuff to work on as a player as well, but there's certainly talent with him. And then in the 6th round, Victor Dimukeje, the Duke edge rusher, who I actually like quite a bit more than most people out there. Kind of a stocky build, very wide frame, and only like 6'2" or something like that. But this guy plays hard. Like in the run game, his heavy hands, the ability to jerk back tight ends and really own the point of attack. He does get a little inconsistent with his contained responsibilities at times, where he lets guys get outside of himself. It doesn't have the greatest short area burst to, when the ball carrier is in range, to disengage and make plays on it. But you look at him in the pass game as well, really technically sound with his hands, the power that he brings to compress the pocket, how he can change those things up. And at Duke, he was playing on the opposite side of Chris Rumph, who went in the 4th round to the LA Chargers, I believe, who weighed like 25 pounds less and was looked at this speedy edge rusher. When you look at Dimukeje, his first step consistently is better than Rumph's, and while I don't think he has quite that flexibility, and I'm gonna get to Rumph in my next video, some of the things that he can do, but Dimukeje, I think, plays harder. He can play on the field for all 3 downs. His first step is better, and he has more different ways to affect the game So I think getting him here in the 6th round, that's a player that's going to be in your rotation. And then they get Tate Gowan, who's a super talented corner out of UCF. Actually started his career at Miami of Ohio and came to UCF in 2019, where he started 9 of 12 games before opting out of this past season. Gowan primarily lined up as UCF's boundary corner and played a lot of soft press with catch technique, but he can really frustrate receivers with those long arms off the line and make us work through him, like giving Stanford wide receiver Simi Fehoko all he could handle, who's a big-bodied physical freak. Gowan is also fluid in his deep turns, displays the ability to read the eyes of the quarterback in zone, and his long arms allow him to disrupt the catch at a high rate. In 2019, you look at the numbers that he put up, only allowing 20 of 50 targets his way to be completed for 274 yards and 2 touchdowns, compared to making 2 picks himself, while his passer rating allowed when targeted actually went down by depth of target. However, Gowan really does only have 1 season of high-level play. He's pretty skinny throughout his frame, and he takes some time coming out of his transitions with that lanky frame. But he did run in the low 4.4s at UCF's Pro Day, and he had a really good free control for that size. So I thought he could actually sneak into day 2, and he has starting potential, I believe, at least down the road. So here in the 6th round, that could turn out to be a steal. And so does our next player here, James Wiggins, the safety out of Cincinnati, who was my number 10 overall ranked safety. And he's really a jack of all trades, where you did see a lot of 2-high safety looks at Cincinnati, where he could rotate down or into the deep middle. He can also drop down into the slot and cover receivers, man. Great range, physicality, the ability to get off blocks and make plays in the run game, but also in coverage to have that range in 2-high safety situations where you can have a couple of guys go vertically on his side and he can really play either one, as well as presenting that upside as a man coverage defender in the slot. I really think there's a lot of different things that you can look at with him. The versatility that he presents, the athletic profile, like there has to be some medical issues, and he has a bit of an injury history, tearing his ACL and missing the entire 2019 season, then missing a few games as well this past year with an arm injury. So I'm sure there had to be something on the medical reports that made him drop here, because as a player, really the 2 things that come to my mind about him that he has to work on is his route anticipation, where he tends to play it very conservative and has that explosive burst to get back into the picture, which is not going to be quite the same case in the NFL. And then as a tackler, when he's coming from the deep level, the angles that he chooses can be kind of inconsistent. But like I said, to me, more of a mid-round pick. If he's totally healthy, I could easily see him go in the 3rd round. And then finally to wrap things up with Michael Mennett, the Penn State interior offensive lineman, who was the number 1 overall guard recruit back in 2016. And he has started all 34 games at center these last 3 years for the Nittany Lions. You see him get underneath the passive defensive lineman and keep those feet moving throughout the whistle, delivers a good bump on combo blocks, and works up to the 2nd level in a very controlled fashion, while twisting the bodies of those guys and handing out some extra shoves at the end. In pass pro, he usually keeps his hands inside the frames of rushers and himself centered to them. He did a good job of dealing with Ohio State defensive tackle Tommy Togiai last season, I thought. However, when you look at the negatives, his weight is shifted a lot over his toes, and he can slip off blocks because of it. And he doesn't have the easiest ability to redirect and recover once rushers can get to his edges, as well as only having 31.5-inch arms and more of an average athleticism, I would say, overall. But to get, at worst, a high-quality backup offensive lineman in this range is still some excellent value. So I look at this Cardinals draft class as a whole, with Collins, like I said, that hybrid, versatile player on the 2nd level. With him and Simmons, that is going to be really fun to watch. Then you get an explosive receiver here in Rondale Moore, who's really going to add some juice to that offense, whether it's touching the ball underneath and making something happen with it, or working down the field, where they certainly needed a dependable deep threat, since D-Hop is not your typical go down the sideline and just run by people. He's going to win at the catch point, and Christian Kirk hasn't been reliable enough in that role. And then with the cornerbacks, the Cardinals brought in Malcolm Butler this offseason, and I actually like Byron Murphy a lot in the slot. But then there's Robert Alford, and really nobody else with any experience basically at the cornerback position for them. So to get those 2 guys that have a lot of talent, I really like, as well as a rotational player on the edge in Dimukeji, and Wiggins, who's going to be your 3rd safety on the field when you go into those looks, I believe. as well as Michael Mannett. You get a really good backup offensive lineman on the interior. I thought they could have addressed the guard position here, and they haven't really found anybody to replace Dan Arnold's role. But overall, I actually thought they had a pretty good class. And that brings us to the next team here with the LA Rams, who didn't have a first round pick due to their Jalen Ramsey trade. But then in the second round, 57th overall, they selected Tutu Atwell, the wide receiver out of Louisville. In the third round, 103rd overall, Ernest Jones, the linebacker out of South Carolina. Then 3 fourth round picks, 117th overall, Bobby Brown, the interior defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. 130th overall, Robert Rochelle, the cornerback out of Central Arkansas. And 141st overall, Jacob Harris, wide receiver / tight end out of UCF. In the 5th round, 174th overall, Ernest Brown, the edge / IDL out of Northwestern. And then 3 7th round picks, 233rd overall, Jake Funk, the running back out of Maryland. 249th overall, Ben Skrovanek, the wide receiver out of Notre Dame. And then 252nd overall, Chris Garrett, the edge rusher out of Concordia St. Paul. And you listen to these last 5 names, I would say, I think Rochelle is somebody who a lot of people have heard of, but those last 5 names, you have to be a pretty avid draft enthusiast, I believe, to actually have heard their names even. So I'm going to talk you through these, but let's start at the top here with Tutu Atwell, who was a surprise, considering this was their first pick in the draft, and you get a receiver who measured in at like 150 pounds at the NFL Scouting Combine, or might have actually been 145 pounds, so with that number coming out, I did not expect to hear his name called until day 3, and I don't hate it as much as some other people out there, but I think at that weight, like it's almost unheard of to have a player like that in the NFL play at any position, especially considering that Atwell had his issues already working through contact and dealing with physicality overall, but he certainly brings a speed element, that ability to stretch the field vertically when you get him matched up against safeties in the slot where he primarily played, and you have that two-way go where you can break to the post or to the sideline. Like, he's a nightmare to match up with, because his speed is a level different to most guys that they have at the safety position, especially in the ACC and certainly to some degree as well in the NFL. Louisville got the ball in his hands on some jet sweeps and screen passes, where he has some dynamic moves in the open field to kill angles and run away from the defense, rip off those long plays. I remember him having like a 90-yard touchdown against Andre Cisco, either at the end of the 2019 or early in the 2020 season. And you will have to have a very specific role for him, because I just don't think you can line him up on the outside and let him run 50-60 plays a game. Like, he's not going to be an asset as a blocker, he won't be running a full route tree for you, but if you have that specific role, like I said, where you can get him involved in the jet sweep game, which the Rams love to do already with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp to a lesser degree, get him to open the field for you, stretch the defense down the field, force those safeties to cover deep, and open up room underneath. I can see the value of a player like that. I just think here in the second round, that was a little early for my taste. And then they come back with Ernest Jones here in the 3rd round, the South Carolina linebacker, who I also thought was an early pick here. I got to his tape late, and I actually liked a lot of the things I saw from him. Has some pretty good range and coverage. As a run defender, he won't back down from anybody, and he has that ability to navigate through traffic, has the short area quickness, and ability to rock ball carriers in the hole. Not sure if I love the way that he can take on blocks, and some of the things that you saw from him in man coverage, but there is certainly an appeal for him, especially when you look at that linebacker crew for LA, with Micah Kaiser and Troy Reader being the 2 starters from a year ago. Like, I certainly believe that Jones can bring a little bit more of a dynamic skill set at that second level of the defense, where you can clean up some of those things that Aaron Donald and Leonard Floyd force for you. But once again, I would classify as a reach, just because they needed help at that position. I do like what they did with their prior 3rd round pick, 88th overall, which they traded to San Francisco, their division rivals, and picked up 2 4th round picks here, as they first went Bobby Brown, the defensive tackle out of Texas A&M. You look at some of the athletic testing for him, just ridiculous numbers for what really is a nose tackle at like 325 pounds. Some of the flashes with him, where he can shoot into the backfield as a one technique and really disrupt the offense, as well as that anchor to take on double teams and just own the middle of that defense on some snaps. With him, it's just the inconsistencies that you see in pad level, hand placement, being able to have a plan as a pass rusher. Like, I came away pretty underwhelmed with his tape overall, just because I knew what kind of talented player he is. Like, I heard a lot of people talk about Christian Barmore and Davion Nixon from Iowa as those inconsistent players, and I just think Brown fits that mold best, even though the high-level plays may not be quite at the same level of those two guys, which is why he's less appealing to me, but the athletic talent is certainly there. That ability to just dominate single blocks, shoot into the backfield, toss an offensive lineman to the side and make a play on the ball carrier. There are certainly things to work with, and he will have a long way to go, which is, you saw that video maybe of him talking to Aaron Donald the first time, him being kind of starstruck, and I think best for him is to stay really close to AD throughout this offseason, to just learn some of the traits, how to be a more consistent player. I think there's a long way to go, but the talent is certainly there, so I think here, at the top of day 3, could have easily seen him go on day 2. I think this range for him is perfectly fine. And then we got to Robert Rochelle, another very talented player out of Central Arkansas, the cornerback. Another guy who put up some crazy explosion numbers at his pro day and ran in the low 4.4s, I believe. So the athletic talent is certainly there, and you see it on tape. Made a lot of plays for that defense with sheer athleticism at times, to where you can see him challenge receivers, impress coverage, and even if he loses off the line, has that makeup speed and ability to get back into phase. From off coverage, the way he can drive on routes, the explosiveness that he has coming out of his stance, and then at the catch point, playing it at his highest point. Pretty good ball skills to bring the ball in himself. Very inconsistent at this point. Some of the things that he got away with against Division 2, that's just not going to happen in the league where everybody's super athletic and everybody's really good. I'm interested to see if they maybe look at him as a nickel early on, where he could be competing with David Long, who was a late round pick or UDFA for them last year coming out of Michigan, since they did lose Troy Hill this offseason for agency. So he's another guy. I mean, you saw him during the Senior Bowl. He had a tough time really adjusting to that high level of competition. But I just thought some team may fall in love with the athletic profile and he could actually go earlier. So here in the 4th round, I'm fine with it. Just think he has a long way to go himself. And then we get to another very developmental type of prospect, I believe, in Jacob Harris, who played wide receiver for UCF. But plenty of people looked at him as a potential tight end to make that move. 6'5", 220 pounds, but he is a redshirt senior who all of his production came over these last 2 years combined, where he caught a total of 49 passes worth just under 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns for an average of just over 20 yards per grab. Like I said, he played slot receiver for the Knights, but he projects best as a flex tight end if he adds a little more to his frame, tracks the deep ball tremendously well and adjusts his body to it. And you look at the athletic testings, ran a 4.4 flat with a 1.6 10-yard split to go with a 41.5-inch vertical and an 11.1 broad jump, putting up a crazy athletic score for a wide receiver. I know Dane Brugler, for example, was really high on him, and I thought he was pretty intriguing on tape, flashing the ability to sink his hips and win as a route runner, to go with the speed that he would bring to a tight end position. But of course we have no idea if he can add anything as an in-the-box blocker, and he will have to prove himself some special teams. Yet, if they mold his body and game accordingly, they could be looking at him as this Gerald Everett replacement to some degree. Obviously, he's not going to be as good as Everett was for them, at least for a while. And they also have Bryson Hopkins, who was a mid-round pick for them last year, coming out of Purdue, who certainly was a very effective pass catcher in college. So he's going to have a long way to go and really establish himself on special teams. But with that height, weight, speed combination that he brings to the table and the skill set that he has overall, I think he's somebody worth of having around. And then move on to 5th round in Ernest Brown, the defensive end / interior defensive lineman out of Northwestern, 6'4", 270 pounds, another one of those big-bodied base defensive ends out of Northwestern, who they put over guards quite a bit as well in passing downs. Brown is a worker bee type of player, can stand up blockers and kind of bend them backwards, where if he's matched up against tight ends in the run game, he can take those guys for a ride. But he lacks that reactionary quickness to actually chop down the ball carrier a lot of times. When you look at him rushing the passer, there's way too much belly-to-belly action, and he isn't super effective with his hands at this point. But he can create push up the middle with power, and if you give him time, he'll get to eventually, just because he keeps on working. The Rams are probably looking to transition him to more of a 4 or 5 technique, head up on the offensive tackle, in the role of the departured Michael Brockers, who they basically swapped Ashawn Robinson for, who I believe is going to be a good player for them. And Brown is going to give that defensive line some depth. Just not sure how much is going to get out there anytime soon. Very different to the other guys that they picked in this draft, with not nearly the same type of athletic upside, but more of your floor play, I would say. And then in the 7th round, 3 picks that they made. First, Jake Funk, the running back out of Maryland. And first of all, that's an all-draft name. But he did have some good tape as well. Funk does a great job of stretching the defense horizontally and causing the defense to overflow. But also in tight quarters, I thought his ability to sort through traffic and get to the open field is pretty impressive, as well as his burst to bounce out wide. And then he has some power to drive forward at the end of his runs. Very elusive with releasing out of the backfield as a receiver, and has some natural hands in the pass game. He needs to work on being able to sustain them better, but the way he steps up and picks up blitzers is actually really solid. Like, he's somebody whose tape I got so late and I was intrigued with. So with Malcolm Brown now out of the building as that 3rd down back, there is a role opening up that I could see him filling. However, the Rams also snatched up Raymond Calais off the Tampa Bay practice squad, who I also like quite a bit as a returner and pass catching back. So we'll have to see which of those guys makes the roster and can have a role on that team. Then Ben Skowronek, the wide receiver out of Notre Dame. He's up there with the best blockers at the wide receiver position in this draft. I just think as a receiver, a big body, a possession type of guy, nothing that really stands out for you. You watch him during the Senior Bowl, in those team drills, his blocking, getting after it a little bit, that is something to like about him for sure. But in those one-on-ones against DBs, his ability to create separation definitely needs some work, be a little more deceptive as a route runner, as well as having a couple of drops. So I didn't get to a lot of his tape, but wasn't really blown away by anything. So with the blocking ability, they're probably looking at him as a key contributor on those return teams, and maybe he can cover the role for himself that way, but wouldn't be shocked if he's on the practice squad for the most part. And then finally, Chris Garrett, the edge rusher at Concordia St. Paul. While it is a very generic name, I had never heard of this guy before he made it in the draft. Garrett apparently had a rough upbringing and his grades suffered because of it, making Division I not an option for him, but he did get a full scholarship and amassed some crazy numbers at Concordia, recording 48.5 tackles for loss, 36.5 sacks, and 15 forced fumbles, which is a Division II record over his 3 years there. He certainly is undersized at 6'3", 240 pounds, and it'll be a big jump for him, transitioning to the pros, with average athletic testing especially for that size, but he has a frame that can add some weight to it, and his tape is pretty crazy to watch, making opponents look like absolute scrubs, just what he should do, showing pretty good feel and technique as a pass rusher. So he's a developmental prospect, maybe he's going to be in the practice squad early on, but somebody who could be down the road a difference maker on passing downs. So looking at this class as a whole, the first 2 names were certainly reaches in my opinion, and then the next 3 names I would certainly describe as very much talented, but developmental prospects, and that to me doesn't quite coincide with their stars and scrubs type of approach of roster building, although I did like the fact that they traded back twice and acquired extra picks, so there's certainly some upside with this draft class as a whole, where Tutu could open up the offense more with his speed, Jones could give them some more range on that second level of the defense, Brown could become a problem at nose tackle, Rochelle could be your Darius Williams replacement potentially if they can't pay him next offseason, and like I said, Jacob Harris, some crazy athleticism, potentially transitioning to more of your flex move tight end, with a couple more floor players later on. So as a whole, I didn't love this draft necessarily, but let's get to a draft that I actually like quite a bit in the San Francisco 49ers, who went first round, 3rd overall, Trey Lance, the quarterback out of North Dakota State, 2nd round, 48th overall, Aaron Banks, the interior offensive lineman out of Notre Dame, 3rd round, 88th overall, Trey Sermon, the running back out of Ohio State, the 2nd, 3rd round pick, 102nd overall, Ambry Thomas, the cornerback out of Michigan, then 3 5th round picks, 155th overall, Jalen Moore, the offensive tackle out of Western Michigan, 172nd overall, Deomodre Lenoir, the cornerback out of Oregon, and 180th overall, Talanoa Hufanga, the safety / linebacker out of USC, and then found in the 6th round, Elijah Mitchell, another running back out of Louisiana. So we definitely knew what was going to happen with those first 2 picks in the draft, because Trevor Lawrence was the #1 overall pick for like 2.5 years now, and Zach Wilson really emerged in this pre-draft process with people getting to actually study his tape. So the big question was what was going to happen at number 3, and the intrigue really started when the 49ers made that blockbuster move, trading the first-round picks of these next 2 years to Miami in exchange for this third overall pick. And we knew it was a quarterback, obviously, that they traded up for, but they had 3 options, so it really wasn't clear which way they were going to go. At the start, it was kind of a tie situation with no clear favorite. Then Mac Jones' name was often correlated with the team before Justin Fields took over as the betting favorite after his second pro day, which kind of died out and really took us until a couple of days before the draft, for it to become a 2-man race between Mac Jones and Trey Lance. All the while, I was saying the whole time, like you can go back, everything I talked about here on YouTube, everything I wrote, all the time I thought that Trey Lance was the pick for them. And to me it really came down to him being the perfect fit here, because you look at the different arguments with people looking at Jones as this version of Matt Ryan that Kyle Shanahan had in Atlanta, who's your more accurate pocket passer who can just run the offense for him. And then there were the people completely against that, who said you're not trading up to number 3 to select that kind of quarterback who has a capped ceiling to some degree, talking about Lance and Fields as those athletic phenoms. And I really was in the camp of Trey Lance because I thought he best combined those two things. As somebody who's coming from a run-heavy offense at North Dakota State, where he's familiar with a lot of different hand fakes, the footwork off play action, being able to set his space and make those big-time throws down the field, as well as having that intriguing ability as a runner, the speed that he has, the power, where he can actually run through linebackers and finish his runs strong, which is going to be something that he actually has to work on coming into the league, because his coaches are going to scream when they see something like that in an actual game situation, but brings a very dynamic skill set, a howitzer of an arm. I thought in terms of the pure talent, Lance might be the #1 overall quarterback and #1 overall player in this entire draft. Obviously just having 1 year of starting experience, plus that one game against Central Arkansas that he had in 2020 as kind of a showcase game. I didn't want to put too much weight on that because they kind of only prepared for 2 weeks, I believe, and nobody was really ready to play. So definitely not the most favorable position for him, but he took that chance to play in that game, and for him it was more about his teammates supporting them. So if anything, that should be a plus for him as a prospect. But on the field, needed to speed up his footwork to some degree, which you saw at the pro day, and I really think he has good footwork, a solid base to throw from. There were some accuracy issues on the deep level. That is something that he has to still improve upon. But I think he can absolutely run this type of offense. And I really think it's overblown how he should be sitting on the bench year 1 when he's already pretty much sat out a full year. I think he needs some live reps and ready for play, which I could easily see him starting at some point this year, if not for day 1, if they actually want to trade Jimmy Garoppolo still. Of course, the experience is a limiting factor for him. When you look at it, being recruited as a linebacker or safety, coming out of high school by some of those Big Ten schools, and him going to North Dakota State, where he only gets that 1 year, and put up some incredible stats with like 28 touchdowns throwing and no interceptions, to go with another 15 touchdowns on the ground or something like that. Obviously, it's going to be a big jump for him, and he can't quite rely on that arm talent as much, being able to still get the ball there if he's a little late on those throws. But I really think he could be special in this offense to go with Kyle Shanahan. That's going to be an incredible pairing. And like I said, I think he brings the best of both worlds in terms of somebody who has experience executing this type of offense, as well as the upside that he brings as a passer and runner, being able to create things off script. He's probably in the best situation among all drafted quarterbacks. And then we move on to the second round. 48th overall, Aaron Banks, the interior offensive lineman out of Notre Dame, was one of my favorite guard prospects in the entire draft. I thought 48th overall here was a little bit early. A lot of people looked at him as potentially going on day 3 even. I thought he was solidly a mid-day 2 pick, but this was as early as I could see him go. And I like a lot of the things that he brings to the table. Plenty of starting experience for the Fighting Irish, and you just look at him aesthetically, fills out his jersey and pants really well. In the run game, brings a lot of thump at first contact, and just that ability to keep his legs moving and driving guys off the ball, as well as in the outside zone run game, when he has to execute those scoop blocks on the backside, Maybe not the greatest short area quickness necessarily to actually put his body in front of those guys, but even if he can't quite get there, will move those guys out of the way and create big cutback lanes for his ball carrier. In the pass game, has a really firm anchor to keep the integrity of the pocket upright, and when he gets those hands on you as a defender, you're not going to get away from him. He does have a tendency of leaning too far over his toes, and him getting off balance because of that, letting defenders get to the edges of his frame, as well as not having the greatest lateral agility to stay in front of those really quick interior rushes. But I think overall a super solid prospect, will fit right in at right guard alongside Alex Mack and Laken Tomlinson at the left guard position, where those two guys are actually quite similar, and I think really that offensive line has the potential to be the best unit in the entire league. And then in the third round, they kept adding to that run game with Trey Sermon, the Ohio State running back, who they certainly really wanted since they traded 2 4th-round picks to get up here. And Sermon was another one of my favorites at the position. Maybe doesn't give you the greatest breakaway speed or ability to just make people miss in the open field, make them look foolish, but such a natural ball carrier, that ability to make subtle adjustments on the move as a runner, set up blockers and weave through the defense, plus just the power that he can build up on those zone run plays. At Ohio State, where they ran a lot of zone read from shotgun, and then more of your split zone from pistol, where you can definitely tell that he's more comfortable getting downhill and building up that momentum, where he really becomes a battering ram on that second level, breaking tackles and just driving through contact, getting those extra yards out there, as well as pretty good speed, where he saw plenty of long runs at Ohio State, even though I wouldn't call him a sprinter necessarily or anything like that. In the pass game, somewhat untested, didn't get a lot of opportunities at Ohio State especially, and it took him a while to establish himself as the go-to guy, that workhorse kind of back, but he saw it in the playoff, set a new record for any conference game in terms of the rushing yards of over 300, then also tore apart the Clemson defense in the semifinal, before finally getting hurt early on in the national championship game unfortunately. But like I said, just a really natural runner, somebody who's perfect for a zone type of system. And you add him to the backfield where you already have Raheem Mostert. Jeff Wilson apparently is going to miss some time early on, but he definitely showed some signs later on. Like, it's going to be tough to earn those carries actually, but if we know anything about Kyle Shanahan, it's that he's going to feature all of his running backs and give them their chances. And then with the second pick in the third round, they selected Ambry Thomas, the cornerback out of Michigan, somebody who not a lot of people are talking about since he opted out the 2020 season. But you go back to the 2019 tape, the physicality and competitiveness that he brings, challenging bigger receivers off the line, and really being a pest for them throughout the route. Does work to get off blocks and make plays in the run game, but it's his ability to play sticky man coverage that really intrigues you. You watch him down during the Senior Bowl week, where receivers had a really tough time separating from him. That physicality can get him into some trouble at times, where he's too grabby and he's going to draw a flag because of it. But he's going to challenge you at the line when the ball is in the air. Like, he's not going to back down from anybody. And for the 49ers, Jason Verrett really stepped up for them. Finally had the chance to stay healthy and have the resurgent year. And I definitely like K'Waun Williams in the slot, who missed some time last season as well, where I look at Thomas potentially being a starting nickel, but I could definitely see him starting alongside Verrett on the outside as well. And they got another guy 2 rounds later, we'll get to in a second, who was kind of in that same mold. So I thought here at the start of the 100s, that was definitely in range for me. And then we move on to the 5th round, where they got Jalen Moore, the Western Michigan tackle, who was one of my favorite day 3 offensive tackle prospects. He's a former 3-star tight end / offensive tackle recruit, and he started all 22 games these last 3 years. Moore definitely delivers some thump at first contact, and really runs his feet to open up big holes at the point of attack, but also has pretty impressive short area agility to execute those scoop blocks on the backside of outside zone runs. And then he has those 11-inch hands, which he latches onto pass rushes to go with a strong anchor. You see a lot of guys struggle to come up with solutions against Moore in the pass game as he stays square to them, and those guys try to get their hands up as the rush stalls and just kind of impact the play in any other way that they can. When you look at the numbers, he held opposing rushers to just 28 pressures on over 1,100 pass blocking snaps these last 3 years combined, and I thought during Senior Bowl week, he did a great job of riding edge rushers past the arc and then landing on top of them during one-on-ones. As far as the negatives go, he does end up on the ground way too much for my taste, and is rather top heavy overall, where his weight distribution and base can be a little all over the place at times. And as a pass protector, you see his center of gravity shift to the outside foot too much as well, while having some issues with those guys that can really threaten with speed. But you look at that system in San Francisco, if Trent Williams or Mike McGlinchey miss any time, I believe this guy will do a good job stepping in and could one day replace either one potentially. A little late in the 5th round, I hope I get the pronunciation correct, the Amador Lenoir, the Oregon corner, who was a 3-year starter for the Ducks and played on the opposite end of Thomas Graham, who I like quite a bit as well, where he was Oregon's boundary corner as another rather undersized guy for the position with basically equal measurements as Graham at 5'10", slightly under 200 pounds, running in the mid 4.4s. But this guy plays with a lot of attitude and physicality. He has a ton of experience in press coverage, consistently landing stabs at the chest of receivers, and having that explosive lower body to flip with them. He's also an outstanding tackler with only 9 misses on 168 career attempts, and he doesn't wait for the ball carrier to come to him, but actually works upfield. However, when you look at the numbers, he did allow 15 career touchdowns according to Pro Football Focus, where his size does become an issue in the red zone, and he's fairly conservative in zone coverage, I would say, unlike the rest of his game, to where he's missing chances to actually make plays on the ball. We already saw some highlight clips from 49ers OTAs, where he's beating up receivers and intercepting the ball, so this guy's a scrappy player for sure, who I believe can earn some snaps here through special teams. And then with the 3rd, 5th round pick, they get Talanoa Hufanga, who I actually thought was a little overhyped in this process. A lot of people looked at him as a day 2 prospect, and I really thought in this range is more where he belonged. Actually was a little surprised to not see him go earlier, because he's that big, strong safety with great athletic testing that people fall in love with seemingly every year. And there were a lot of those guys in this draft, so maybe that's why I went a little later than expected. The issues that I have with him on tape, I don't think he really ever played up to his size at like 220 pounds. When you look at the way that he approached blockers and worked the run game overall, as well as in coverage, I didn't think he was very instinctive in that regard necessarily, but at the same time, really good range for that size, has the ability to match up with tight ends. You saw him move to the outside with some running backs as well, has the length to challenge receivers at the catch point, and some pretty good burst when he's covering like an out route to undercut it. Had a big pick 6 against UCLA that way last season. As I've mentioned, I never thought that he plays like this big-bodied safety necessarily, but moves around well for it, certainly has the frame to deal with blockers, and be that add one in the box that can really contribute for you. So for a Seattle type of system, I would say still that the San Francisco 49ers run. I think him as a strong safety, and to some degree maybe a dime linebacker, depending on how they want to use him. I think in this area, that is perfectly fine. And then I really like the 6th round pick, Louisiana running back Elijah Mitchell, who kind of surprised me running the mid 4.3s. I didn't think I saw that speed quite on tape, but it's good to know that he has it, because to me what I actually was more impressed with was his toughness for being a little undersized maybe for the position, and just the physicality that he ran the ball with, bouncing off tacklers, just keeping his feet moving, and trying to make the most out of his runs. Him and Trey Ragas there in that backfield, that was really a two-headed battering ram, with Mitchell always having a little more speed to get out to the edges and threaten the defense that way, and when he gets to the second level, that he can blow by linebackers and make big plays, which was the issue with Ragas to some degree, where he got caught from behind quite a bit. Mitchell has plenty of experience in a zone-heavy rushing offense, where his ability to get the defense flowing laterally and then stick his foot in the ground and get upfield is pretty good. That backfield for the Niners is starting to look pretty crowded, and so for Mitchell it's going to be hard to actually earn some carries. But if a couple of guys go down, I think he's more than capable of filling in and making something out of those chances that he gets. So as we look at this class as a whole here, I think the 49ers found the quarterback of the future in Trey Lance, who does need some work and earn some more experience, but has all the talent in the world. A new starting right guard in the mold of what they already have on the left side in Laken Tomlinson. 2 more guys, like I said, to add to this backfield and really make them a 4-handed attack almost. 2 feisty, somewhat undersized corners who could be competing for that starting outside job to go along with Jason Verrett and be in competition here with Dante Johnson. one of my favorite day 3 offensive tackle prospects, like I explained. And then a good fit for their scheme at strong safety, who I thought was fine for that range. So you could definitely see the 49ers knew who they wanted, trading up for Trey Lance obviously, and then also Trey Sermon in the 3rd round, as well as Aaron Banks going higher than most people expected. But I like the way that they approach this thing, and I really believe they have a Super Bowl ready roster where they did get to the big game with Jimmy Garoppolo, but he just hasn't been able to stay healthy, and I just think the high level of play hasn't really been there with him. To go with not really taking advantage of the chances that he gets from Kyle Shanahan in this offense, the way he draws things up, and some of the playmakers that he has around him now, I think you bring in Trey Lance and extend that window that you have there to where whenever he's ready to play, I think they are a legitimate threat for the NFC. And that brings us to the 4th and final team here in the Seattle Seahawks, where you can see it's a pretty short list, only 3 picks here. In the 2nd round, 57th overall, Dwayne Eskridge, the wide receiver out of Western Michigan. Round 4, 137th overall, Trey Brown, the cornerback out of Oklahoma. And round 6, 208th overall, Stone Forsythe, the offensive tackle out of Florida. So with the 2nd round pick, first of all, you expect the Seahawks to trade back maybe and acquire some picks, especially considering that they have done this every single year pretty much under this current regime. And if they stuck there, the 2 areas that I thought they could be addressing was defense in the secondary, after they had some major issues early in the year especially, even though they kind of re-emerged at the end of the season. And then offensive line, since you had Russell Wilson talking about how he's getting hit too much. But instead, they went with another weapon in Dwayne Eskridge, the Western Michigan wide receiver. And he's somebody who I really liked on tape. That ability has that sprinter background, where when he catches a slant route, he can take it 70, 80 yards on any given snap, as well as down the field, tracking the ball and getting behind the defense. You saw him show some lightning quick feet from the line and being able to defeat press coverage. Although that's going to be definitely a jump for him to move from those limited athletes at the corner position that he faced in the MAC to those guys in the league who aren't nearly as afraid of his speed and are comfortable with challenging him from the snap. So I definitely think it's not going to be as easy for him, and he probably projects best to be a slot receiver primarily, which is probably going to be for Seattle next to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Not the most complete route tree for the Broncos here, with a lot of slants and fade routes, posts, stuff like that. But he does have that ability to catch the ball underneath and just run away from everybody, as well as if you use him in the slot, beat safeties down the field as well. And he was an all-conference level of contributor as a returner. So looking at the receiver corps for the Seahawks, losing David Moore as the number 3 receiver, the guy that they used in the slot, more of a bigger body, who was a very underrated player I believe. You replace him with Eskridge here, who doesn't have that same type of size, but definitely gives you a more dynamic threat on the inside. And now you add him to Metcalf and Lockett, who are legitimate 4-3 runners, and Eskridge is in that range as well. Like, that is starting to look like a track team there for Seattle, where it's going to be really tough for defenses to match up with them. And then when they pick again in the 4th round, they do address the cornerback position with one of my favorite guys in this draft, in Trey Brown from Oklahoma. Certainly undersized at only like 5'10", 185 pounds or something like that. But this guy was punking dudes in the Big 12, being super physical in press coverage, dictating route stems and not allowing receivers to get into their proper position. Like the way he was throwing off timing, challenging receivers down the field, staying attached to them, and then fighting when the ball was in the air. Like, he was such a fun player to watch, and he more than held his own in a pass-happy conference, where quarterbacks a lot of times were looking that way with the number 1 receiver, but had to come off it because their guy was nowhere near the position that he needed to be in. And you saw it again at the Senior Bowl. He to me was the best cornerback all week long, challenging receivers in everything they did. And he actually had 2 interceptions in one-on-ones where you rarely see any picks if the ball isn't completely thrown up for grabs for some reason. But it was actually him just being physical, and when the ball was in the air, just driving on it and making plays. Certainly not the type of size that you're used to from the cornerback position in the Seattle system, and that lack of size does bring some concerns with it. But his tape shows a highly competitive corner who can play on the outside, but might actually move into the slot for Seattle and finally get them to play less space than they're used to, where they are just astronomically different from everybody else around the league in terms of keeping 3 linebackers out there on passing downs. Maybe they want to make more of the transition, put Brown in the slot, letting challenge receivers there, because you do face the Rams and Cardinals, who could be living in 11 personnel next season with the kind of personnel that they have there. So that could definitely make some sense. And then in the 6th round, in the 200s, they get Stone Forsythe, the Florida offensive tackle. And there had to be something wrong with his medicals or off-field stuff, which I'm not aware of. And I'm actually way lower on Forsythe than a lot of people out there. But even for me, it seemed like it was crazy for him to be there in the 6th round. Brett Coleman had him in his 1st round mock, which he got mocked for by a lot of people. And I certainly thought that was crazy to have him up there. But he was somebody that we were told the NFL was high on than most people out there. Forsythe's like 6'8", 315 pounds. Crazy height and length for the position. His signature game probably came against Georgia, against Azeez Ojulari, who was one of the top speed rushers around the edge. And Forsythe constantly made him run the loop, get past the arc, to where he couldn't get to the quarterback. And that is really the upside with him as a pass protector, that length to make guys go a long way, and also pretty good lateral agility to adjust when they try to make an inside counter. But the issues for me really, in the run game, he really doesn't give you anything as a drive blocker, can execute on reach blocks, and get into way of guys, where his long arms once again can make it tough for them to actually crash the gap. And overall his hip mobility is kind of a mess at that height. Being able to uncoil his lower body and actually create some power, as well as bring his legs around on those type of on-the-move blocks. Like, to me, he was a day 3 prospect all along, but I thought he could easily go on day 2. And 6th round here in the 200s, that is even late for me, who wasn't a big fan of the player. For this 3-headed draft class of the Seahawks, they obviously had very limited draft capital, but I certainly like the players that they acquired with those. Eskridge makes this tree of wide receivers in 11 personnel really a track team that the defenses are going to have a very tough time sticking with. Brown may not be a typical Seattle corner necessarily in terms of the measurements, but certainly in his attitude and game. And they got a developmental offensive tackle prospect who perennial Pro Bowler Steve Hutchinson has signed off on, so he definitely thinks that his issues are fixable. I would have certainly liked them to trade back from the 2nd round pick, where they probably could have gotten Eskridge a few picks later, and they give up the 7th round pick to move up for Forsythe, although I think that investment is definitely worth it. But just overall, you could have definitely acquired some more draft picks in this process and fill out that roster. But like I said, I do like the players that they did pick up. And with that, let's quickly compare these draft classes against each other. At number 1, I have the San Francisco 49ers. Just thought they definitely knew the players that they wanted to target and didn't mind giving up extra draft capital to get there, which isn't always the best way to do it, but a lot of the players that they picked up, I had pretty high in my rankings. Trey Lance was always a perfect fit for me, and I actually bet him at plus 500 to be the pick at number 3 overall. I think that offensive line now with Banks at right guard, and you have Jalen Moore as your backup for the tackle spots, like they are going to move some people in the run game, and now they have a legitimate threat throwing the ball deep, as well as creating off script here with Trey Lance when he's ready to play. So they could move back into the favorite role for that division. And then slightly behind them, I have the Arizona Cardinals, with Savin Collins 16th overall. That was definitely surprising to some people, and he was even early for my taste. Had him a few spots later in my personal rankings, even though I really liked him as a player. The things he presented as an athlete, and on tape the things I saw from him, definitely will be a playmaker on that 2nd level of the defense. And Rondale Moore will be the same thing for them on the offensive side of the ball. I didn't love Marco Wilson, the Florida corner necessarily, but all of the picks they made from that point on, whether it's Tay Gowan, James Wiggins, Victor Dimukeji, a lot of guys that I actually thought should have gone a lot higher and were more victims of the situation they were in. So they are definitely a close second. And then the Seahawks, they only had 3 picks, and that's why I don't have them any higher, which they can't really do anything about that right now, having traded away all those picks. I'm not going to judge them for what they did before the draft, but I certainly like the players that they picked up. With a new starter in the slot, and either at the outside corner or nickelback spot, and then a developmental offensive tackle prospect, like I would have certainly liked them to trade back a little, acquire some more picks, but I can't hate too much on it just because of the players that they picked up. And then I think the Rams are clearly 4th here, reaches with the first 2 picks, a lot of players who aren't really ready to play in my opinion, and definitely need some polishing. Not quite sure if that's the way to go for a team that is in win now mode, having traded for Matt Stafford this offseason. And while he never picked in the 1st round, those mid to late round picks are definitely something that they need for that roster, where they pay stars a lot of money and need those other guys to contribute for them. So I'm not sure if they really accomplished that with this draft class. We'll have to see down the road. But there is certainly some separation here from the Rams to the rest, at least according to my evaluations. And with that, let's wrap things up. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share it with a couple of friends who are interested in the draft and the NFL as a whole. We have now done 7 of 8 videos. I highly encourage you to check out the other ones if you're interested. And we're going to wrap things up with the AFC West on Friday. If you have any questions or comments about these draft classes, make sure to let me know in the comments or on my social media channels, which you can find linked down below in the description, as well as on the screen here right now. I will be back next week with a write-up on what I think are the most improved position groups in the NFL over this offseason. Make sure to head over to my page, hellotofootballtalk.com for that. And I got a lot of other stuff in the works this offseason. So until then, see you later. Peace!